So the next person up is, as I said, my partner in crime, Doug Rabold. Um, as I said, Doug is somebody who's been investing in understanding this more than anybody else on the planet, probably, arguably. And he's looked at this from all sorts of perspectives. And one of the perspectives that I know Doug is very enthusiastic about in his private life is Disney, and Disney as a benchmark for experience management. So, Doug, it's time to bring you in. So,
Hello, everyone. And as Alan mentioned, I am a longtime Disney geek, and I actually had the distinct pleasure of meeting a gentleman named Lou Prosperi, who has written several books about the Disney Imagineering process. And he and I are actually collaborating on putting together potentially some workshops in the future. And I have run a couple of workshops in the past using that as a solve my problem. But as I was going through that solve my problem, it really occurred to me that a lot of what the Disney Imagineers do is very XLA relevant. And so, with Lou's blessing and in collaboration with Alan, I've actually put together a new presentation that I'm going to share with you folks here on Imagineering XLAs and really calling it the art of experience, if you will. This is me. I'm not going to go through that because I have only 25 minutes, and Alan knows I'm very verbose, so I'm trying to do my best to stick within my time limit. But suffice it to say that I've very much embraced the experience management approach over the last several years. I always like to begin every presentation I do with the end in mind. And so, very much similar to a Disney attraction, the things that we're going to focus in on in this brief time we have is experience is an end-to-end accumulation of moments over time. So it's not just a one and done big bang. It's really how do we get to that end sentiment over the course of time. We're also going to take a look at how developing XLAs is a creative process that's informed by data, and that in essence, nothing bad nor good ever lasts forever. And so all of these things really circle around both the practice of XLAs as well as the Imagineering process. So I'm going to start by saying what I carry in my wallet, and trust me, this is a safe for work response. I actually have, for the last about 7 or 8 years, carried around in my wallet both a Six Flags theme park annual pass and a Walt Disney World pass holder season or annual pass. I invest considerably in those two things, much less so in the Six Flags park um, pass, but there is a Six Flags park literally 2 exits away from me. I can hop in my car and be there in 10 minutes and be through the gate and riding rides. Um, by contrast, the Walt Disney World is halfway across the country from me. I'm in San Antonio, Texas, so I have to fly across the Gulf of Mexico to get there. But the point being that the common experience that we expect when we go into a theme park is one of somewhat instant gratification. There's usually these short thrills, but they're interspersed by long waits in line. It tends to be very transactional, sort of a low cost, relatively low cost, and low value, if you will. Um, they also, theme parks these days tend to be very crowded. And if you've ever been to San Antonio, Texas, you can only imagine how warm it gets in the San Antonio heat 8 months of the year, particularly since that Six Flags park was built in the middle of a quarry, literally a stone quarry. 3 walls that surround that park are limestone. And in essence, when you're in those long ride queues, there's almost no entertainment value. It's usually out in the heat, in the sun, and in part two, they don't necessarily do a great job of keeping the graffiti off the walls and keeping the trash picked up. So maintenance can be a little bit of an issue too. When I contrast that, however, to what an exceptional experience looks like, that's why I also maintain that annual pass to Walt Disney World, and am willing to fly several times a year across the Gulf of Mexico to get there, and pay more for the benefit of being an annual pass holder. And that's because the exceptional experience tends to be much more immersive. There's these story elements that are interspersed within those long waits. Yes, the crowds are still there. Yes, you still have to wait a long time to get onto one of the attractions, but there's this element of immersion while you're there. And while the price is high and higher than what it would be in the previous example, the value in return is much greater. And so, part of that is because the rides themselves are very immersive, they're very entertaining. They have these pre and post show elements. So you actually begin to hear the story of the attraction itself while you're in line, and then it continues afterwards. And I've actually included a couple of screenshots here that of pictures that I took in the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train queue, where on the left, the picture on the left, you see those gemstones. You actually can touch those and they play a musical note and light up. The barrel on the right is a little bit further along in the queue. Once you go into the ride house, instead of it just being a covered, a covered shed, if you will, it looks like a mine. And if you spin that barrel, it actually projects a hologram up onto the ceiling. So there's these immersion elements that are included in the show, if you will. So it's not just waiting in line and waiting for that cheap thrill of riding a roller coaster. And beyond that, they tend to be very well maintained. So you very rarely will see chipped paint or graffiti in queue for at Walt Disney World, and that's because they believe in this exceptional experience approach. So you may be asking yourself at this point, how is all of this relevant to XLAs? Here's how. Imagineering is a term that was coined not by Walt himself, but he adopted it. And it's a combination of the two words imagination and engineering. And by definition, the way Disney defines what Imagineering is, it's this blend of creative imagination along with technical know-how. And if you stop and think where we're implementing XLAs these days, it's very much that combination of imagination, creativity, thinking outside of the box that we've been in for the last 4 decades of service management, and layering in not just new creative elements, but also utilizing the technical know-how that we already have in place. So here's the really cool part is Imagineering process itself shares many of those same characteristics common to the creation process of XLAs. Many of you who have sat for or are studying for the XLA certifications are going to be familiar with these two elements. And on the left is the XLA stack. On the right is the experience management framework. And so what these are is these show us, and I'm gonna pull up a laser pointer here. These show us how we actually build out an XLA. And you heard Joe earlier talk about the various data points. There's the technical data that we're already collecting. There's the operational data that we have to the nth degree. And then there's also the element of experiential inputs or experience indicators, those X data, so those new surveys that Joe's teams developed. And really defining those along the lines of what is our ambition? What do we want to be able to deliver? And then what are the outcomes that we want to deliver? And then finally, what's the business impact? And this is all part of this framework. So this is the XLA creation piece itself on the XLA stack, but this is the framework around which that revolves. And so there's various stages, which is enlighten, explore, envision, enable, execute, and embrace. And each of them has their own specific part to play. But the point being that this framework is very cyclical. And so it's ever evolving. And if you will, it's a continual service improvement loop of are we defining the XLAs the right way? Are we refining them as we need to? And are they still relevant? And part of that is, as both Alan and Joe alluded to, there's that element of the experience management office. And that's that cross collaborative piece that allows us to get the right people in the room in order to ensure that we're driving the end-to-end experience forward in the manner that meets our experience outcomes and experience ambitions. So this is Lou's model. And you can see it's a little bit different. We were looking at a cyclical model before, but the way that Lou has broken down the Imagineering process is into a pyramid, and it's 15 different practices. And we're not going to go through all of these in deep detail. As I mentioned, I do have developed a workshop around that. So if you're interested in hearing more, certainly reach out to me and we can talk more about these in greater detail. But what I'd like to point out is that those 15 different practices are also arranged into 5 tiers, which is why he constructed it as a pyramid. And really, in essence, what this starts off with is you have the foundations of Imagineering, you have this wayfinding element, you have this visualization or visual communication piece, then you have making it memorable, and then what's called Walt's cardinal rule. And when I take a look at our experience management framework, the foundation of Imagineering is really that envision and explore, those explore and envision phases. The wayfinding really correlates to enable and execute. Visual communication is absolutely in that execution phase. Making it memorable is embracing the experience management approach. And then Walt's cardinal rule is really enlighten. So I'm going to take a look at these in a little bit deeper detail. So I said we're not going to go into great depth with each of these various elements, but I did want to point out a few that I think are particularly relevant to focus in on. When we look at this foundation phase, so this bottom tier is the foundation tier. And I mentioned how this really correlates to envision and explore. If you think of begins with a story, that's what our desired experience outcome is. So when we're building that XLA stack, that's really the basis. What do we want to achieve? What's our experience outcome that's intended? Creative intent is those various objectives. So those are our ambitions, our experience ambitions. Then looking at things like attention to detail. That's the various data elements. So that technical, operational experience inputs that we have, those various data points that we're collecting, and how do we get the detail out of that, tease the detail out in order to construct the XLA the right way. And then theming is really when we look at all of that massive body of data that we have, technical, operational, experiential, do we have accuracy? Do we have completeness? And do we have everything we need? And if we don't, are we going to seek it out? Are we going to find that level of detail? Are we going to find those data points? Or are we going to live without them and construct an XLA that may have some sub XLAs or data elements that may not be complete? Then moving up a tier, when we look at that wayfinding tier, there's the pre and post show, which is really that's indexing those data inputs. So as we construct the XLA, when we get into actually building out that XLA stack, that's what the pre and post show is. We want to be able to pre-communicate what are we going to measure, how are we going to measure it, and why are we going to measure it. And remember, XLAs are going to be prioritized, and Joe touched on this a little bit as well. We're not going to try to boil the ocean. We're not going to throw 20 or 30 different XLAs when we're brand new at it. What we're going to do is we're going to focus in on 3 to 5 things that we really want to drive improvement of in the next year or so. And then when we look at things like, and Disney uses the term weenies. Weenies are large things that grab attention. So, as an example, you'll often see, you have the various the castle in Magic Kingdom, and you have the tree in Animal Kingdom. Weenies are those things that absolutely draw attention to for the audience. And then we also have storyboards, and what these correlate to is those dashboards that we're creating. So when you build out an XLA, Joe showed us what his heat map version of it looks like. So green, amber, red. But really, once you take it to the next level, usually you build out some accelerometer dashboards. And frequently they'll be done in like a Power BI or some other data visualization tool. And those really sort of show the progress, if you will. So those really become sort of an accelerometer heat map. And those are the kind of things that, particularly at that executive level, so Joe mentioned about getting executive sponsor buy-in, those are the things that they want to see because it's an at a glance. And then moving up to this visualization tier, more of the same. But here's where we really start to look at that execute phase. And so execution in the XLA environment is really making sure that everybody that needs to be involved is involved. And so when we look here, we have elements of forced perspective. This is that end-to-end cross-functional element. Unlike SLAs, where things tend to be measured within a support area, XLAs tend to be very end-to-end. And so you may need data sources that you're not accustomed to asking for. Getting data from different support areas, different support teams, even outside of IT. And beyond that, you have this readability. And so this is that data visualization, making sure that you're capturing things and advertising, marketing, if you will, your successes in a very readable fashion. Then moving up yet another layer, making it memorable. The small world effect, as soon as I say that, I'm sure everybody has the song going through their mind. And that's exactly what's intended. The small world effect is how do we get this in everybody's mind? And this is where, when it comes to the small world effect, XMO becomes the experience management office becomes very critical. There has to be regular cadence. And then hidden Mickeys, if you're familiar with what they do, the Imagineers do at Disney, they'll actually put hidden Mickeys throughout the parks, even throughout movies and films and even visual art. And those are things that will reinforce with you that you're at looking at a Disney property or a Disney artistic endeavor. So when it comes to this, what you want to do is you want to make sure that everybody in the experience management office, all the critical players, all the key players, are participating, getting everybody in the room that needs to be in the room so that they're helping drive this forward. And then finally, plussing is that enlighten phase. And so this is where it becomes iterative, data-driven, and driving continuous improvement. And this is how, in essence, sort of the experience management framework ties together with the Imagineering pyramid. And so the bottom line here is that XLAs and Imagineering are very closely aligned. Like Imagineering, XLAs are a creative yet data-driven approach that delivers exceptional experience. And you can see that it's actually, this photo was taken, they actually did things based on what they know about me, the data that they've collected on me in the past, what would draw my attention. And you can see there's even a couple of hidden Mickeys in here. So takeaways from this experience is the accumulation of end-to-end moments over time. It is not just that quick instant gratification. XLA development is a creative and data-driven process, and experience objectives evolve over time with the changing context, and that's what the plussing element is. It's also what the enlightened phase of the experience management framework does. For more on the Imagineering pyramid, I would encourage you to read the following from Lou Prosperi. He has 3 different books, and they are available on most major bookseller formats. And this is me. Please feel free. That QR code is how you can reach me. That's my LinkedIn connection. I'd be happy to connect with you to keep the XLA dialogue moving. All right, Alan, do we have time for any questions, or did I go over again?
No, you're perfect on time. You're doing marvelous. To be honest, congratulations on this presentation, because I think it was very cool to see the mapping with Disney. Because I think most people, especially the people that have been to Disney, will appreciate that it's a very it's a very scaled proposition, and when you come away from Disney, you come away with memories and emotions, and I guess that's what we all aspire to at the end of this. So if you have your questions, get them into the chat right now for Doug. If not, he will be back into the round table, and we will pose some other questions to him at that point. So if there's no question. Well, Doug, I just say thanks so much. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.